I met John at an industry event at Mastro's Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan.
Yep.
It was being thrown by one of our water vendors, and under the influence of a lot of steak and red wine, I was introduced to John by one of our work colleagues. And I maybe spoke to him for about 5 minutes, and he told me a little bit about what he does, about how he speaks about managing across different generations. And within that 5 minutes, I was like, we need to invite him in. At the time, I was just new to my role, but I knew that when we did an offsite, that he was gonna be one of our guest speakers here. So that's how I met John. So when they say good conversations happen over food and wine, it's definitely true. So John, why don't you give an introduction?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me in. This is not a presentation, this is a conversation. The person that Dave was referring to walked me up to the table Dave was sitting at, and he said, tell me what you do. I'm like, what do I do? And he said, tell me about the multi-generational workforce. And I said, well, I've been recruiting since I was 19 years old. Don't have a PhD, don't have a college degree, but I've been recruiting since I was 19, and in 2000 started 2 companies, one that places people in law firms, attorneys and whatnot, and then another company that places people in corporate America, including in the amenities space, corporate reception and the like. About 2008 and 9, the game kind of changed with the rise of the millennial generation. They wanted a different experience, and people didn't know how to react. So I started to lean into it with my recruiting and stuff. And then 3 years ago was the game changer. I was on a Zoom with a candidate who was an associate in a law firm. I ended up placing her on the job. And I said to her, this pops up on screen. And the cartoon bubble pops up and says, old guy. I said, what you don't know is I believe in you guys. You want to do interesting work with good people at a fair wage, at a firm you believe in that believes in you. And then you want to go home. And you want to have a life. And you don't want to be defined by what you do for a living. Unlike my generation, I'm the youngest of the boomers, we were defined by what we did for a living. So she encouraged me to get out there with the message. I started popping out onto LinkedIn and Instagram with videos to each of the 4 generations and the firms that employ them, and it blew up. I didn't realize what pent-up demand there was. So I've gone down the road of, LinkedIn reached out to me. I've done a couple of modules at their offices. Some of the biggest law firms in the world reached out to me. One, in fact, in New York, who the managing partner, when he got me on video, he said, you're like the attorney whisperer. Like, where'd you come from? And I said, he said, how did you come up with this? And I said, it's not anything I came up with. This is my lived experience of recruiting people across 4 generations for 40 years. The generationality of work, as I term it, is everything encompassed both in your work life and your personal life. I talk about people have different need sets. Maybe you're just starting out in your career and your need set is that you and your husband or wife are going to start thinking about starting a family. If you're more toward my age, maybe you're thinking about taking care of aging parents and how that impacts you in the workplace. So as I developed the idea more and more, it became very apparent that leaders like you guys, and I did a little legwork on all the people that were going to be in the room, and I know you fall into the 4 buckets that David mentioned and stuff. And as I looked at some of your profiles and tried to piece together stuff, and I tell you all that not because I want to show off or anything. I just want you to know I was prepared, and I tried to find out who you guys were. And one of the other things, thanks to ChatGPT, was learning that, there are people that have between 30 and 100 direct reports, or, 0 to 5, or in the case of these 2, 300 plus and probably 500 plus. So I wanted to share all that with you and how I got to this point. And then today, we're just going to talk about a few things that deem as important for you guys to hear. I want you to feel like you could throw up your hand and ask a question, say, this happened here, what do you suggest? If you come out of this session with one thing, just one, that you go back to your group with and you try, you're going to be ahead of the curve. And you're going to find that the themes that keep coming back, communication and accountability, and that includes self-accountability. So that's kind of my story.
Great. No, that's a great introduction. I'll pause there. Any questions for John so far? So everybody in the room has experience managing across multi-generational folks, right? Whether it's vendors or subordinates, etc. So, you want to start or?
No, I think I think today we want to take all the things that we're learning. We've touched on bureaucracy, we've touched on communication, managing teams, and everything that's in those buckets. It's quite nuanced. So I think the goal of this conversation is to help you either refresh some of the tools that you are really good at that you may not tap into, learn a new tool, but also understanding how across all these different generations, communication and how you as leaders lead them and the impact that they have, that you can have in their lives, right? Because ultimately, you probably all heard the same, people don't leave companies, they leave managers. So we want to be aligned, and again, the theme of leading the teams in an aligned fashion. We are going through a lot of different org changes, right? And I think also the workplace, even within the firm, is changing, right? Like we've got all this AI, data-driven pivot that we are making a very hard pivot while managing and doing our day job. So I think those are all probably the topics that we want to touch on. And I think, John, you have a wealth of knowledge with all that. And we want to hear, how do we navigate this? Some of us may be further along in some of these buckets than others, but ultimately I think as one collective, we should at least listen to the same message or discuss the same topics as a team.
You make a good point. And what's the one thing that's absolute? If the clients that you all serve, no matter who they are across all of your duties, get the result they want, you're going to employ more people, and going to give you more opportunity in your career. And that's really, now we're at a point in time where you have to reverse engineer everything else. Some of the questions that'll come up about communication, and I'll be pointing to make yourself clear. Don't assume they know what you're talking about. Get it out of them, get mutual agreement, and then move on. Because if you do that, you're drawing them into the process and you're getting them to be more accountable in their own right, never mind be accountable to you.
And I'll just jump in with a question right there. How do you do that oftentimes when I'm in a lot of meetings, it's like you try to get that alignment. It's like, is it clear, is it not clear? And it's just crickets. How do you break through that first wall?
Yeah, the meeting isn't the place for that.
Yeah.
It's before. It's one-on-one conversation. I saw some of you having popcorn outside, and you're talking amongst yourself, and you go, I didn't even hear what you were talking about. The fact that you were just kind of there, it brings you into something here that says, wow, we were talking about that, or I'm going to this meeting and I know it's going to come up because we've talked about it and Z number of times. It's really the time before the meetings. One of the things that I find in my corporate clients is the endless meetings, and I'm sure everybody in this room is starting to shake their heads, yes, endless meetings, right? You don't have to have endless meetings, you have to have productive meetings. And if you have productive meetings, they're generally because you've done some legwork in between the meetings, in the everyday. Jason took us on a tour of what is an amazing amenity space that you guys have here. The passion with which he talks about his job and how he could go to work for Goldman Sachs or he could go to work somewhere else, but he likes it here because it's home, it's family. And he said, he asked somebody to do something and they were happy to do it, not because he was standing with us, but because you could see genuinely he had treated that individual well throughout and communicated throughout that when the ask came, it was minimal. And so it's the same thing for meetings.
Yeah.
So what does a high-performing multi-generational team look like in your mind, Jonathan?
They are a group of people who appreciate each other's differences. Everybody's generationally judgmental. Everybody sees the pasty white guy as one thing. And then I open my mouth and they're like, where'd you come from? That kind of thing. But just have strong multi-generational things. Number one, don't be so judgmental. We're living in a time where it's no longer about, these kids today, and it's not about, okay, boomer. It's everybody. And I talk to a lot of people across all the generations, and I say to them, you weren't expecting this, right? And they're like, no, it's unique. I'm like, it's not that unique. What I do, it's not hard. It just requires a lot of effort. And in corporate America, sometimes you don't have time to make the little effort. That becomes the challenge because it's constantly driving it home. So multi-generational teams that are successful, they communicate effectively. They don't hold any feedback against each other. If I told the story of connecting with my daughter-in-law, who is a paralegal, and I asked her to do something, and she did it. She sent me a text, and I said, "Boots the house down." How many people know what boots the house down is? No? Okay. Boots the house down. I read this because she said, "How the hell do you know what that means?" And I said, "Because I can read." Okay. Boots the house down is a phrase that came out of the drag community in New York. And when somebody like RuPaul and the people she has on her show do a great performance because they all wear high boots, it's not bring the house down, it's boots the house down. She was flabbergasted that I knew what that was. I turned it into a video on LinkedIn talking to senior partners at law firms about their junior associates. It's like, if you just put yourself out there a little bit, try to communicate, you'll be surprised how the younger generations, if you're my age, are like, "Okay, old man, like I get what you're trying to say, but good for you for trying to meet me." And that's what a lot of this is about. If you're mid-career, you're managing people older than you and younger than you. How do you do that? That requires a whole nother skill set. And those are the things I think when you build a multi-generational successful team that you lean into. You know, that communication, that giving people, cutting them a little slack is the phrase I use with people. And getting them to feel like they can be themselves and not ridicule them and say, "Oh, what do you know?" Whether you're old or young. So it's really about communication.
And those multi-generational teams that have issues, say, because a lot of us have those as well, is it an issue around leadership? Is it an issue around clarity about expectations?
It's messaging. It really is messaging. I, in my younger days, used to say, make something idiot-proof. You just want to, you know, it's like listen, like I'm saying one thing, that's my intent. You're hearing something else, and that's the perception. We have to bridge that gap. And how do we do that? I do workshops on stuff like that. And it's really about getting to a place where people hear and see one another. The communication is key, but it's really the messaging. And I tell people, and you guys know this, because you're all directors and vice presidents and whatnot, everything's a test. Every email, every phone call, every personal interaction is a test. And you could be the person that throws out the test to yourself. And then you can judge the other individual how you wish. But more importantly, you can kind of change your messaging to where you see that the person finally goes, I get it. And then you can build on that. So it's really about messaging.
John, in our environment, there's a lot of there's a lot of complexity to our roles and us as leaders, right? There's a lot of matrix reporting, dotted lines, different asks. You know, you kept me on copy, but you didn't copy me, but he's my boss. Who do I report to? Like, you know, I'm sure that everyone here has some of this or a flavor of that. So how do you, like, kind of moving past the generational piece, what does like alignment look like in simple terms and collaboration in that type of sort of team environment and everyone sort of getting used to different org charts? How do you see that visibly?
Well, it probably filters down from you a great deal to I think you have 7 or 8 groups under you. Okay. You know, it's like, how do you get that messaging to align? Number one, it has to be clear and concise. You can't overcomplicate it for people. Number two, it has to be driven home every day. Anybody know who Danny Meyer is, the restaurateur?
Yeah.
Ever hear the Union Square Cafe story?
Which one?
Wait, well, good stories, but yeah.
Which one?
Okay, well, okay. So there's a famous story about him. He's at Union Square Cafe, 2:00 in the afternoon, and he's like cursing to himself. And he's pounding the table, he's got stuff open on the table, and there's a woman, one of the ladies who lunches a few tables away. And she goes, "What got into you today?" And he goes, "I tell them, I want the salt and pepper shakers here. I don't want them here, I don't want them here, I don't want them here, I want them here." It's like, I can't get them to listen. And he was going on and on and on. And he said, what do you think I should do? And she said, I think you should sell your restaurant. Because if you're not prepared to put them here, to put them here, to put them here, to put them here, you're never going to get that message across to everybody else. And it's the same thing when you align like directors and vice presidents and the titles that are in this room. You guys are all aligned. You talk amongst each other and you get to a place where like, okay, Jeff needs this. The three of us under Jeff have this, mantra that we want to get this done this way. But we have 48 reports to us. How did the three of us get those 48 people all on board? Consistent, concise, simple messaging. And don't leave it to chance. You can ask questions like, so I told, like, this is what we're doing. Can you shoot me a note back with your thoughts? If people don't respond or they send you something that's wrong, you can react to that. People that are right and with the messaging that you're trying to align among the directors and the vice presidents and the other titles in this room, well then, you're halfway down the road and then it's pulling the others across the finish line. Again, it's not hard, just requires a lot of effort. You have to be relentless in it. That's the challenge.
That's really good because earlier we were talking about sort of mid-years, annual, and how these conversations shouldn't be a surprise. So I think that's a good way to approach them. To kind of get that fire.
And people that fall short, like you're going to get people that work for you that as you start to do these things, because the horse is out of the barn. This is not changing. You have to motivate people that you thought should have been self-motivated. Right? You all got to a certain place because you're all motivated in what you do. You're what I call high performers. Well, if you don't have a team of high performers, you can't replace everybody all at once. My son Trevor is a corporate chef. He is a regional KM for Grand Lux Cafe. He runs a team of about 50 people. And we talk all the time about, he said, I can't replace this guy. I need him. But I can't replace him just yet. I'm like, that's HR's thing. Reach out to HR and get the high performers on your team. And eventually there will be a couple of people that you'll have to say goodbye to. But more importantly, number one, you'll get the attention of everybody else. Right? Everybody else will up their game. And then the people you add to the team will be part of what's moving forward. How many people here, this is always a question I like to ask, how many people here have people on their teams that ghost them at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday? Mine doesn't be so. But some of it, right? I mean, in all honesty, that's your fault. Believe it or not. Because if everything's a 5-alarm fire at 3 o'clock on a Friday and you keep coming to it with the next 5-alarm fire, that really turns out to be something that's really a 1 alarm. And they go back on the email trail and they see that you were reached out to the second time this week, the first time being on Tuesday. And now it's Friday at 3 o'clock and you're jamming it into somebody's inbox trying to get something covered. That's going to create the ghosting. If you have a realistic view of your workflow and then you keep that Friday open for the true 5-alarm fires, throw them one every other week or every third week. You'll be surprised how they respond. I've seen it happen.
I have a question. So I'm very new to the firm. I will be making a year next month.
Probably a high performer because they hired you.
He's doing a great
So
job.
I joined I manage the lobby reception team and I work with generation team. I'm also managing like a team that has been with JP, many members that have been with for over 15 years, and some of them seem, not some, like maybe one or two, they seem demotivated. They just want to come in and operate 7 to 3 and go home. How do we bring that motivation back to life?
You have to have a hard conversation with them, about that. And like, we're moving forward, and you can give them examples of other people on the team, and you're not pitting one against the other. You're just trying to kind of reignite the fire in them, and say to them, what are the things I could be doing in my role to support you to where you're a bit more proactive, or want to offer your opinion. We're not just punching the clock here. We're really committed as a company to giving the kind of service that is high touch service. And maybe you got beat up a little bit over the last 10 years. You know, maybe people didn't appreciate you, but I appreciate you. And I'm new to the game, but I'm trying to kind of carve a different path. And you're important. You're important. I'll say, I think one of the things, as I was reading through the questions that was sent to me, is people want to be seen. They want to be appreciated. And that goes down to the most recent hire. People want to be appreciated because if they're appreciated, and if they see you as somebody who's been for a year, and you're coming in and listen, I know the vibe is, oh, she's trying to score her points and, you know, get better and all that on my back. No, that's not what this is about. What this is about is I have a different philosophy and I can help you. I'm not saying to you, like, if you've been doing the job 15 years, you have no other aspirations, that all of a sudden this is going to be like you'd be doing cartwheels coming to work. I'm not saying that. But I want to make it where it's good for you. Because if it's good for you, you're going to get better service, you know, in the reception and concierge ranks. I don't know if that's helpful. Is that...
Great question. Do people with these different tenures handle these changes differently, and how can we support each other? Like, he's seen a lot of change. He could be influential to the group, but like, not picking on you, but an example like that across the teams.
Yeah, I think it's important to have people that have been in place a long time that admit that they don't have all the answers, number one. And number two, that they tap into the most junior employee who thinks they have all the answers, right? This is the way it should be. Well,
you know, they don't sit you in the big chair and you work, I'm sure many of you work more than a 7 or 8 hour day. And, you know, they don't pay you the big money and sit you in the big chair if you're not really working. And, I played a round of golf with 2 29-year-olds last summer. And one was a guy that worked at Morgan Stanley, the other one worked for Aon. And I said, what do you want more of? Do you want recognition or advancement? And they were like, oh, advancement, because advancement you've already recognized. I said, yeah, you want to see the table. He goes, that's right. And I said, yeah, but when they call your name, what are you going to say? You have to know what you don't know. And if you know what you don't know, as somebody who's been here 2 years, and, you know, you're mid-career, but your tenure here is short, or you're somebody who's been with, you know, in the industry for 15 or 20 years, you both bring a very positive thing to it. You have to be open to hearing it. And that's part of the challenge for people sitting in this room, because you have a lot of people working for you who are maybe not as open as you'd like them to be, you know, about hearing your message. And the worst thing you can do is go back to your teams and say, I learned this one thing, this is great. No, these are the things I learned. Why don't we have like one 15-minute meeting to bounce around one idea? And then be prepared to call on all your people individually, put them on the spot. Because they'll appreciate over time that they had something some input to give to the conversation.
Change. So our organization's gone through a lot of change over the last year. We have new folks that have come onto the team. There's new alignment and reporting structure. We have a new boss's boss. Our new CAO is new. So where does the resistance to change really come from across these multi-generational groups?
It's the interpretation of the message is the best way to say it. Look at the Knicks.
Yes, I got it next.
Look at the Knicks. Like, you know, Thibodeau, the last coach, he brought him to the precipice because of his coaching ability and all that, but they didn't buy in. They bought in with the new coach. They believed in each other. The circumstances unfolded with their path, and they were able to attain something that nobody really ever gave them a chance to do. So change is constant. It's how you manage the change. It's what the messaging is to the people. Those of you that have been here 20 years, you know, that are sitting here saying, well, I have a global perspective, right? I don't know how that comes all the way down. I'm sure that you're savvy enough and you've been around long enough that you see it coming all the way down to the person standing behind the pizza station, you know, serving some executive. That messaging have changed how you are able to move that from where it was to where it's going to be. It's not something like do these 5 things. and your troubles are over. It's a constant living, breathing animal. And when you talk about the people that you bring in, whether it's a new CAO or people down the chain of command, if you get them all to buy into one thing, the future, we don't even know what that looks like right now. We're all in the same boat. We don't know what it looks like. We know we aspire to do more. And if you just tap into that, that is a great way to get people to all move in one direction. The Knicks did it. They aspired to do more.
I love that the Knicks came up.
As long as we don't talk about the Jets, I'm okay.
And
So
do
if you were,
find-
you did your homework on this leadership group here. If you were to advise this leadership group on 2 to 3 takeaways or actions from this meeting, what's some of the advice you give them?
Number one, know what you want to say it, and make sure they hear it. And there's no shame, and people say things like, what did I just say to you? No, you don't want to handle it that way. What you want to do is you want to say, we have this initiative coming up, we have a deadline of Thursday, what do we need to button up by this time? Oh, we need to, these 3, 4, 5 things. Okay, so as I understand it, what you said was this, and this. Is that correct? Am I right, or am I missing something? And let them tell you. And if they don't, then you've gotten your message out there, and then tell them about the follow-up. Listen, I know we have we have an update call scheduled a week from Tuesday because they're coming a week from Thursday. But I'm going to reach out to you beforehand, just very informally, just you and I, and then write yourself a note to do it before a week from Tuesday. Because if you start to show them that you're a little more checking in, you're a little more on top of things, then all of a sudden those people are going to adjust their behavior and be ready for that call in advance. And if they kind of put you off in that call, maybe it's 4 days before the next meeting, say, we do have an update call 2 days from now. I can see you probably had other things going on, but I need you to focus on this. And let me know if you have any issues, let me know before the meeting, shoot me a quick email. And you're putting things into place that will enable you to get people to self-manage. That's self-accountability.
But every member in this room should look at their weekly calendar and remove 1 or 2 meetings.
I would also add, either you remove it because you don't need to be a part of it, or, to kind of back to what John is saying, who on your team can step up?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, is the
stretch.
meeting the right structure?
Right.
Is it too long? I mean, maybe you don't remove it, maybe restructure the meeting, or the right folks on the meeting,
Yeah, who's leading the meeting?
right? A lot of times we set these recurring meetings on our calendar years out, and it's you end up looking at the person on Zoom for a half hour, and it's just unproductive.
So it's when we were doing our prep, we were rifling through stuff. And then when I got on with both of them, I need to be mindful of their time. I was 15 minutes, we'll be able to bang it all out. Now not everybody moves at that pace, and there are some people that you'll have to bring to meetings and kind of cajole them and kid glove them a little bit. But, as directors and vice presidents, you could speak amongst yourselves and say, listen, I'm sending so-and-so, but I just want to make sure that he covers this or she covers this in my absence. And you could tip them off. You could shoot a 1-sentence email. And, you don't want to get meeting heavy, you want to get execution heavy. That's really.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think we can all benefit from some insight. I think sometimes also hearing it from a third party or a neutral party is always great. But what are some best tips, practices when it comes to meetings? So should they be recurring? Because that in itself is kind of a lazy approach, right? You're recurring it so you don't have to put in the effort like you're kind of talking about, right?
Whether they're every other week or a
Yeah.
quarter or.
And the calendar defaults to 30 minutes, but is that the right cadence? What are the best suggestions that you?
Number one, is it a meeting that you've attended that has 10 minutes of schmoozing, 10 minutes of actual work, and 10 minutes of saying goodbye? That meeting should go away right away. That's the first thing. The second thing is, understand how it impacts you and your team, and don't be afraid to delegate somebody to it. It's actually very empowering to send somebody else to a recurring meeting and say, listen, I'm not stepping in this week, this month, because I want you to kind of get your feet wet a little bit. And maybe you could bring an idea, and we all have people on our teams, the kids that did their homework on time in school, right? There's always those, right? You want those kids, like put them in the meeting, let them think about it for a couple of days leading up to the meeting, let them be all jacked up, let them be, go to the meeting and feel like, all right, like I'm a puppy waiting for my bone, and let them say one thing and let them fall flat on their face if they do. Or maybe you get feedback that says, wow, that person, rock star. And you knew it, but you never gave them the opportunity. So use it as an opportunity also. The last thing, try to stay on topic. And managers, I'm guilty of this a lot. Vito listens, my right hand listens to a lot of things. I tell people my wife has more patience than anybody. She'll just listen to me jabber on. It's like Forrest Gump and Jenny. It's just the way it is. But understand who you are and cut to the chase. And it's not that you're not giving people the time, making them feel the warm and fuzzy, but make them understand that you don't want to waste their time. And it's great. A great practice is to say, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So I'm going to do 5 minutes on this, and then we're going to talk. We're going to be done by 20 after the hour. Set it. And then if you come up on it, you didn't cover everything, don't drag the meeting out. Cut it. You kept your word. Again, you passed the test, and you'll get buy-in for the next meeting.
Any questions for Jonathan?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, kind of touch on your recruiting background, because I do a lot of hiring and interviewing. I wanted to know if there's any key indicators you've identified over the years that no matter the generation, this is a green flag of a successful candidate, and also red flags.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah.
The shortest answer is you can know everything you need to know about an individual by the way they were raised. People that show up dressed appropriately, on time, giving people what I call the may I help you attitude. That gets you through 90% of everything, right? There are all these coaches out there who will say, don't talk badly about your previous employer, it's a red flag, right? But the reality is that you're leaving that job for a reason, and you have to be prepared to talk the talk. Green flag, somebody who's a high achiever, somebody who tells you a story about how they had their first job working in a deli, and their parents really couldn't afford to send them to college and they got a scholarship. Or in the catering and culinary arts, I was not really sure where I was. I went to school for business. I didn't like it, but then I had a passion for cooking. And I went to Johnson & Wales, and I did well. People that show that kind of thing. People that are coming to interview you. There's a lot of people push back, especially on the two younger generations. They ask questions like they're interviewing the firm or the company. And I'm like, that's healthy. Because if you're a good manager, you're going to be able to answer the questions and get that individual to do what you need to get done as part of your team much easier than somebody who kind of goes, well, I answered the ad and the recruiter told me it was a good company, and that's that. One of the biggest red flags that I look out for are people that are a little too serious. You have to have enough confidence in yourself at a point in your career, where you're kind of a little comfortable in your own skin, and you're not afraid to tell a story of, this is how I really blew it, but this is how I bounced back. I fill in the blank, but I was able to kind of not get fired for it because I put in the extra effort to make sure it would never happen again. Whatever it happens to be. There's always that kind of stuff.
How much do you trust your gut as opposed to checking boxes?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm a gut truster.
So no data?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so no, to add to that, how much do you trust your gut over metrics?
Okay, 150% gut, 0% metrics. Why? Everybody's an individual. Metrics aren't made for individuals. Metrics are made for meetings like this where you could get a sense of who's doing what and what you're delivering and deliverables and all that. But if you really want, if you really want to get a sense of someone, you have to sit across from them, get the feeling from them, trust your gut. You're all in the positions you're in because you've attained success either at other companies in the industry or here. Believe in that, believe in your own ability, and quite frankly, once in a while you make a bad decision. Somebody will, I tell people, I meet people for a very finite period of time. Can they get over on me? Sure. I never talk about subject matter expertise because I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm a people expert. It's like that managing partner said to me. He said, "How did you come up with this?" And I said, "This is my lived experience, of talking to people. I just listen. And I'm interested in people that are different than me. I was very fortunate in the way I was brought up. And, I was brought up Jewish on Long Island, and my mother would do Passover Seder, and my father worked the night shift in the loading dock at the post office in New York City. All of their friends were Black and Hispanic couples. So I got to learn about culture and art, music and food at a very young age. So for me, it was great when I went into an industry where everybody talks about diversity, and stuff. Don't look like this, look like any of the people in this room. And that is something that you can embrace. And when you look like you and I do, and you put yourself out there a little bit, you'd be surprised at the reaction you get from people. They really appreciate it. They're like, "Wow, you're evolved. I want to work for you." So trust your gut.
What advice do you have for this group who has to interview and recruit? And we are 5 day a week in office. And when we've lost, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but I've lost recruits who have said, "Well, what's my hybrid flexibility?" And I said the flexibility is we are a 5 day a week in office.
Yeah.
What's some advice you have for talking to that younger generation?
Number one, understand that you can't paint with a broad brush. I always talk to people about being atypical of your generation. I'm atypical of my generation. People, they hear the things that come out of my mouth, and it's not like most people my age. Find the ones that have work ethic, a desire to provide top level service. That should be number one across any business. And understand that, if a job is posted and it's posted as a 5 day a week job, and a candidate comes in and saying, "Do you have any flexibility?" Well, no, it was posted as a 5 day a week job because we're giving white glove service to everyone here. And we want people who reflect that, and we try to make it as pleasant an in-person 5 day experience as humanly possible. And maybe in actuality, it's a soft 5. Maybe once you're settled in and down the road, there's opportunities. But understand something, this is the way we work, but more importantly, this is why we work that way. Get to work. He said, have breakfast with somebody, have lunch with somebody, take a meeting, do the things that you could be doing. The pandemic kind of was a tough thing for everybody. I had a team of 10 before the pandemic. We had 3 retirements right away and 3 youngins that went home to California and Arizona. And when faced with the choice of getting space in New York City again, rebuilding a team, I looked at what I was doing and I'm like, I'm good at this. I'm good at recruiting. Why wouldn't I want to do what I want to do? So I started to lean into it. Then the messaging came across of the multi-generational workforce, and lo and behold, created a whole new business around it. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was stuck in, I have to get back into New York City, I have to have a space. You guys are the other end. We need them to be here 5 days a week. We're not making a judgment on you, but we don't expect you to judge us as an employer because of the high touch, white glove, top shelf service we provide to everyone here. And if you come work here 5 days a week, it will feel like 4 or 3 because you won't be working for a company or an organization, A, that doesn't appreciate you, B, won't put you ahead, and it give you opportunities to move ahead, and C, obviously pay you well.
When we've talked about retention, but we had a session, we were talking about succession planning, and that's a key driver, a key strategic priority for us as a group this year. And a lot of us don't have that answer. Is it good to have a mirror image of ourselves? Is it good to know that? Is it good to have a 6-month plan? Talk about succession planning a little bit.
I talk about succession planning a lot inside of departments. Identify people in your own departments that you can see maintain the chain of command. It doesn't have to be immediate. It doesn't have to be a mirror image. That's one of the biggest mistakes everybody makes. If they were just like me, this would run, this department would run. If they were just like you, this department would go down in flames. Okay, because time is moving by. And what was good, one of the big, I did a conversation the week before, 3 weeks ago. And it was to a room full of boomers. And I'm like, you guys are the problem. I'm like, I'm one of you and you're the problem. Why are you sticking around for so long? Right? All of you think you have something to give until you're 60, 70, 80 years old. All of that's true. But you have a whole group of people behind you now that have been stagnant. And the people coming up behind them are going to pass them by. How do you manage that succession? Because the Gen Xers may not be qualified to succeed the boomer. And then you have the millennials coming up the rear that are like, show it to me, I'll do it, show me the leadership qualities and I'll get there. And then Gen Z coming along that's like, listen, I'll try anything once. So, twice if it holds my interest, right? Isn't that the old joke, right? And, for me, succession planning, it's about identifying the people who you can do the job. 2, reflect your values. And number 3, have the people skills. They gotta have the people skills. For the older, for the younger. If you're 38 years old, if you're 34 years old right now, guess who you hate more than anyone? 27-year-olds. It's the funniest thing to listen to. I have young millennials saying to me, these kids today, they don't work like I did. And I'm like, I was at this conversation presentation that I told the story of. I knew this would never change, and this is a brand new issue for companies. It's only a few years old, but we're at the beginning. And how do I know it never changes? 2 years ago, my wife and I had our bathroom redone, and 2 days after they leave, the toilet leaks at the base, and they send the plumber back in, and the guy comes in my front door, cursing from the moment he got to the door. He says, this kid, I told him, he just doesn't do what he's supposed to do. I told him, you take the, and this is how he was talking. And he's like, I told him, you take the silicone, you put it around the base, you take your finger like this, and you make the seal. See, listen, no, he's on the phone with his girlfriend, he's smoking a cigarette. You would think my van is 400,000 feet from your front door, and tell him to go get a wrench. This kid. So I bring him upstairs, my office at home is across from where the bathroom is. And I hear him grumbling to himself. He's throwing stuff, and I keep hearing this kid. So I go in, I'm like, listen, you're right, you need me to get you a sedative or something? Like, what are we talking about? And he goes, it's this kid, he screwed it all up. I'm like, this kid, I'm like, how old are you? He goes, 28. And I said, and you're bitching about the 19-year-old? And you know what he said? Yeah, because he wasn't trained the way I was. That told me this never changes. So if that's our context, how do you get to the place where all the views that all of you have here, you can impart those to people in your departments, 1 or 2 will pop up, and that's where your succession will be.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So we've talked about leading, but how do you lead up? Like in that circumstance, how would the 19-year-old lead up to the 28-year-old?
Number one of the best mechanisms that I talk to people under the age of, call it 35, in corporate settings, is say, I know that I'm only here X years and stuff, but I do have a question about the way we do things. And it's how you phrase it. It's because a lot of people are very quick to say, oh, you just got to pay your dues, right? You just got to do that. Well, that's not true. I'm trying to be mindful of the whole thing. And I also have a podcast, and all this kind of stuff came to a head at the end of last year. And podcast producer and I signed a deal, 26 episodes this year. It's called The Generationality of Work, and you can find it on Apple or Spotify. And the people that I have on the podcast, I want to talk to them about where they are in their career and how they manage up. Mm-hmm. And I had a young man who works for Valley Bank, and he's a business banker. And he's talking to multi-generational business owners, first, second, third generation. And he has a different point of reference for all of them. So you got to know, the phrase is read the room, right? You can't come off you can't take away your own power. You can't overstate it because you're going to have some old geezer that's like, wow, what do you know? No, this is why I think it's important. I think, I want to get a better understanding of where you're at because I want to lean into this, and dive into this, and using phrases like that with more seasoned managers kind of takes away some of the, I don't really hear you. So that's the best way. Be a little bit like know the room, know who you are, and don't be afraid to say, I don't have all the answers, but I do have a question. And if they don't want to answer it, that's on them.
Good question. So we touched a little bit on like recruitment, like talking and communication and how to be effective. Let's touch on retention a little bit.
Sure, that's a big one.
Because we've talked about that as well, and development and coming up with plans, like just I'm not gonna ask you like a pointed question, but give us your wisdom on retention.
My opinion on retention is one, appreciate them for where they are now, and two, have a place for them to go in the future. And communicate that to them. And say to them, you know what the career path looks like here. And there'll always be the employees that are like, well, Stu's in place, he's never leaving, right? So I have no shot. Okay, so that's fine, but what are you doing about your career until that time? Because if Stu surprises and goes off to Bora Bora early, or you get an offer from a competitor, you're positioning yourself, serve yourself. So the retention thing, people, I'm sure you guys have talked about it, they don't quit companies, they quit their direct managers and stuff. But retention's really about people feeling appreciated. They want to be a part of things. I had a law firm client not too long ago that was going hard and heavy for a data privacy and cyber attorney that was going to lead that practice. And he went to another firm. And the managing partner of the firm said to me, what was our big mistake? I'm like, that's easy. I said, you shook his hand, but you didn't wrap your arms around him. You didn't make him feel like he was going to be part of the success here at the firm. And that bit you in the rear end. The same thing here. If people feel like they're a part of things and they feel like there's a path going forward, and then you manage them day to day the right way, holding them to account when they don't do things right and praising them when they do, and they're at the stick. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, or you guys want to give them my contact info and you want to bounce something off of me, feel free, to do so. I'm happy to jump on a call, or, as long as you're quick and I'm not getting in the way of your meetings. This is, like I said earlier, it's not hard. It just requires a lot of work. And you're leading people that, if you can get the next group of people, older and younger, to just lighten up a little bit, communicate a little better, you'll be surprised how they perform. You really will. I see it everywhere. And I talk all the time about the themes I talk about are universal. It's the plumber, it's a law firm, it's a construction company. The themes are universal and it's not going away.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
The way you're delivering to this group, so I feel like we're all pretty much in a similar generation. How do you deliver this message? Is there a different angle you do for different generations that you speak to?
I treat everybody as an individual. I treat all groups as multitudes of individuals, and I say things that are uncomfortable to certain groups. Like the boomers holding on too long, die already, but all kidding aside, when you speak to everybody like that in a group, all of a sudden they have a little more in common. They're like, oh, it's not like he's speaking one way to me, speaking another way. It's not about holding anybody's hand. It's really about treating them like adults. And if they're not prepared to be treated like adults, then it's on them. I have an acquaintance who crystallized it for me last year. She said, my husband and I have taken obstacles out of our children's way their entire lives. And now they're 28 and 27 in the workforce, and they don't know how to handle things. And that's our fault. And I'm like, that's very profound. And so when I talk to groups of people, I talk to them all the same way, because it's not about, these kids today, and it's not about okay boomer, it's everybody. And if you could figure out the 3 generations that you're not a part of and what buttons to push in those generations, you're ahead of the game.
Thank you.
So you mentioned earlier the key in handling multi-generational workforce is to not be judgmental, right?
It's hard, right?
But however, in the world we live in now, most of the employees we have are always after work-life balance. I notice it in the younger generations, they just want to go to work, but they also want to have time to have fun. And in connection with that, we just had our employee opinion survey, and a few of the comments that we saw are, some of them are saying 4-day work week. What would you advise for us to address that?
Work-life balance is one of the most overused phrases in corporate America today. That's where I would start. I've done LinkedIn videos on this, and I spoke at LinkedIn's offices about this. It's not about work-life balance. It's about work-life rhythm. How does your job fit into the rest of your life? And that's the biggest difference now between the 1.5 older generations and the 2.5 younger generations. They want to have time to have fun, but they also want to have time to be moms and dads for the first time. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday who backed out of a meeting with a client, with a potential employer, because his daughter's graduating the 4th grade. And the firm was like, great, we'll reschedule you for Tuesday. So you're gonna have surveys where people want a 4-day work week. You guys don't live in that world. You know, it's a 5, 6, 7-day a week job. And that's why, you know, I hear the horror stories from my son, the chef, about how people don't have work ethic, and they don't have this, and they don't have that. It takes a very unique individual to be in a service-oriented silo. And yeah, it's great that we'd all love to work 4 days a week. It would be great, but that's not the reality of our world. What we want to do is we want to get your work-life rhythm to a place where you don't feel like you're missing out on anything in your personal life. You can still accomplish all you need to, and that's why I talk about a soft 5 days. Believe me, if somebody has a sick parent and they have to go to the hospital, I'm sure neither one of these guys is gonna mind, you know, and stuff. And there's that part of it, and that's the checking in with your team stuff. That's creating the relationships day to day, and sending them to a meeting instead of you know, things like that. Those are all things that are all encompassed, but there's no longer any such thing as work-life balance among high performers or people in the service industry. That's why you're working when other people aren't.
It's a great question.
John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time.